This video by Deadly Nightshade is a prime example of the type of informational vehicle that drives the indoctrination of the population. Let us first take heed to the fact that this is how their YouTube channel looks at 11,000 subscribers and 50 videos. But these types of appearances we notice second, because the first thing that grabs the individual's attention is the prompt that resonates with them and compels them to enter. Now, generally, I'm the type of person who listens and waits to get a full grasp of the spirit. It is a part of reading and the appreciation of life. And it wasn't very difficult to decipher early on that this video was at least voiced by an AI bot, and thus intentionally selected to be a female for added attractiveness and further augmented by the female visuals. Now, admittedly, I tend not to watch the videos like this because the content is more in the words than it is in the visuals, and so I am listening to the words that are being spoken. Now it is time to get into the actual content of what the speaker is speaking about. Now, I want to set the scene a bit here just to really get a grasp on how I'm forced to look at this, because we cannot always be sure that the voice generated is uttering words that are from the philosophy of an individual, or if the script is also generated via a prompt given to the artificial intelligence. Either way, after listening to a recent video by another YouTuber who did use their human voice to speak their own mind about what they felt about hedonism and stoicism, which is another video, I do see how artificial intelligence is very much used by hedonists and people who deny reality to try to find means to justify their stupidity and negligence. And of course, if you beg hard enough, it will perform some sort of gymnastics to give you what you're asking of it. This point becomes glaringly apparent within the first 30 seconds of this video, where the script says Socrates believed that reason was the lamp that illuminated the darkness of ignorance, as the first launch point for saying that arguing is for the weak. First and foremost, one of the first things that we learn about Socrates in any introductory philosophy class is that Socrates did not write any of his thoughts down. He preferred the method of oration because the publication of words are set in stone and cannot be defended by someone who stunts their own understanding by perverting the perspective of the author. The very prospect of dialogue permits the invitation for clarification of what an author means, and even the ability for the author to be corrected and to have a change of heart if they find that their perspective is meaningfully flawed. Now, whether or not I agree with this perspective is irrelevant, but at a base level, the very advent of documentation is a blessing because we have the ability to go back and witness for ourselves the glory that is the works of thinkers of the past. People who have traversed this world much earlier than we did and have irrefutably asked many of the same questions that we encountered during our time here about being human. If this were a human who actually knew about the works of Socrates, they would highlight this basic point about Socrates' desire to orate just for the sake of making a point around saying that arguing is for the weak. So there is an initial flaw. Instead, though, the script goes on to blame Socrates for placing reason at the center of everything and the compulsion to justify even what doesn't need justification. Socrates by far is not the first philosopher to walk the earth. He was actually inspired by other philosophers to spread the practice of philosophy because he wanted more people to participate in it. If you really want to blame someone for the trivialization of everything, why don't you look to the works of people who came before Socrates, like Heraclitus, whose perspectives challenged the very laws of identity and the law of contradiction as provided by Aristotle much later on. The law of identity says, everything which is what it is. Everything which exists possesses nature and identity. It is something and is nothing else. The law of contradiction says, nothing can be both A and non-A at the same time and in the same respect. Heraclitus believed that the phenomena of change is incompatible with the laws of logic. Change requires the existence of contradictions, things which are and are not at the same time. What he meant was that because things are constantly changing, they can never be the same thing. So take, for example, the fact that you have grown to be what we call an adult from being an infant. Heraclitus believes that although you may be the same person, you are really not the same person, trivializing the basis completely, insofar as that you couldn't even be accountable for your past. The end, although it may be the same thing, is actually a different thing because it has changed. Now, if that wasn't enough to shake your head up a bit, I promise you that no point that Socrates has ever made has come close to attempting to remove us that far from accountability for ourselves and the impermeable reality that we all share, which, yes, perpetually changes, but also is recognizably the same as points of discussion so that we can make progress. I am making the point that this content from Deadly Nightshade attempts to blame Socrates and the propagation of reasoning and philosophy for a perpetual state of trivialization and thus inaction by a great amount of the population. Now, this is ironic because the reality is that even in the time of Socrates, there were many people who did not have as much of a choice to make decisions on their lives in the eyes of certain rulers over them and the boundaries of their existence created by their superiors. They did not have as much room for liberty as those who were subjugated by leaders past. In fact, they were most likely too illiterate to even be capable of employing the reason necessary to understand the true intentions of words that were uttered, let alone to debate or question what they could mean. What makes this even more ironic is that the script goes on to advocate for the power of instinctual decision making, even to the point of subjugation of the will of others. For example, have you ever liked someone and just knew deep down that you didn't need a reason, but then reason shows up like an uninvited guest asking, why do you like this person? Or think back to a time when you felt the right path to take. Maybe it was during a job interview, in a relationship, or even in a moment of danger. Instinct spoke louder and you acted before you thought, and it worked out. Not everything that matters can be explained. Not everything explained matters. It also says things like, in our quest to justify every step, we lose touch with something more visceral, more pure, our intuition. The power of instinct doesn't ask for permission. It simply exists, ready to be used. Now, it is 10,000% believable that these types of arguments could come about by hedonists, especially by modern women in this day and time. But if this were the true belief of these people, then we wouldn't be having so much of an issue with the gender war situation that we have going on. Marriage would not be such an object, and feminism as a social movement and ideology would never have gained any real prominence in our society, or at least not anymore. The script goes on using Nietzsche as an object to justify the futility of debate, saying some people believe debate is a way to showcase intelligence and strength, but Nietzsche saw it differently. Debate was often the weapon of the resentful, a way to compensate for a lack of power with sharp words used not to build, but to attack. The frustration of lacking the power to act turns into a desire to convince, to attack, to be heard. Nietzsche called this the morality of slaves. He noticed a pattern in the actions of the weaker. Instead of confronting what oppresses them directly, they create values and narratives to justify their position. These people don't even realize that they are talking to themselves through their own prompts. There is an overwhelming lack of accountability in the work of these sort, and it is baffling that we have allowed ourselves to structure ourselves legally to provide space for these people to feel as if they are really contributing intellectually or meaningfully with their hedonistic ideas. What do we have child support for? What do we call sexual assault and rape and unwanted sexual advances? It is called a generation of consideration and respect for the weaker, and they are apparently ungrateful for our use of reasoning to attempt to protect them from unruly, undisciplined men. It is dangerous that we have this distribution of perversion of the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, because Nietzsche would not agree with the use of his content in this way. Much like he didn't approve of the Nazis using his works to circumlocute the justification of their own beliefs and acts. The fact that they even do this should compel stronger men to simply give this people what they are asking for, which is to be oppressed, to have their capacity for reasoning disregarded, to simply always act in the spirit of whatever we feel we would like to without regard for others. It is foolish. It is stupid to believe that Socrates, Stoics, and people who generally use any modicum of their brain abandon their entire notion of the instincts and intuition and their contributions to our decision-making. It is incredible always that these hedonists take it upon themselves to claim that the use of reason equates to an absolute abandonment of our carnality, when they are the ones who think in absolutes. One final point that I want to mention is how Christianity is also constantly placed in the position of blame for our level of conscientiousness and reasoning of things. The script says that upon making an instinctual decision, How often did you feel a pang of guilt or ask yourself if it's the right thing to do? Shaped by philosophy, it becomes a burden. It teaches us to distrust our instincts, treating them as something to be corrected rather than relied upon. Nietzsche saw Christianity as one of the primary drivers of this transformation. By elevating sacrifice and the denial of desires, he believed Christian morality shaped a worldview where even the most spontaneous actions needed justification. Eating, loving, fighting, deciding, everything became subject to analysis under a correct moral code. But this made us happier? But has this made us happier or more insecure? People constantly forget, or are encouraged to forget, that Christianity by far was not the first organized religion. Actually, Christianity is founded upon the work of the Torah, Judaism, which encapsulates the entire Old Testament, which is what encompasses the Ten Commandments in Exodus, and even features books like Kings, Judges, Psalms, and Proverbs, which speak on topics like self-governance and morality through the history of what was transpiring in a time that is well before us, but that still influence us to this day. Actually, I go so far as to say that the very prospect of language and communication prompts us to be more conscientious of ourselves and those around us. We can speak up for ourselves in completely innocuous manners that resonate with all of us, because we share the same reality, and these things are what help us to understand that perhaps we should be more considerate of others because we do think and feel many of the same things, such as that we don't want to just randomly be murdered or attacked by some person just because they're hungry or bored or suffering, or that we have the capacity to be spoken to and reason with to bring about peaceful outcomes. Nietzsche's disconnects with Christianity and trying to paint this picture of blaming the religion, completely overlooking the contribution that the Jews and others before Christians, aka the philosophers, have made to our awareness of ethics and morality, is indicative of his own intellectual limitations. It's not that I am defending Christianity. Actually, I am defending our humanity and the things that have so obviously been laid before us that make us who we are. Christianity does not and cannot repeatedly take the blame for our capacity for reasoning, when humans have been able to survive for hundreds of thousands of years. That has surely taken some reasoning for us to even be brought to where we are today, spoiled as molded gravy. Anyway, there really isn't much to discuss or argue with people who clearly do not value their capacity for reason and the lengths that men have had to go to defend the integrity and peace of life. You're right. Arguing is for the weak. So perhaps we should get to work on dismantling many of the rights and privileges we have been affording women and the weak for so long, and we will continue to operate the world how we have been able to operate it, minimizing the amount of degeneration we have at the table. Those with ears, let them hear.